Hello and welcome to The Real USA. This week we're at Meridian Hill Park in Washington, D.C. Today, a special program about human rights violations and solitary confinement. I'm Alex Hall. As you watch these stories, I invite you to share your comments and your suggestions via our Twitter at Telesur English. Let's get started. The United States leads the world in the number of prisoners it holds in solitary confinement. It's estimated that around 80,000 inmates are held in small cells for over 20 hours a day, many for decades at a time. According to the United Nations, the practice is considered a form of torture, but it's still used in the U.S. From New York, Vanessa Bergonzoli has the report.
El confinamiento solitario es un régimen de encarcelamiento.
Solitary confinement is a practice of imprisoning people in solitary cells for about 23 hours per day in a well-lit 6-by-9 feet cell. Shane Bauer and Sarah Sharrod went through solitary confinement in Iran. They will explain the psychological effects of this practice and the implications on inmates' rehabilitation.
¿Qué tan eficaz es esta técnica en la rehabilitación de los presos?
It was definitely the most difficult experience of my life. Felt like I was kind of watching myself deteriorate and watching my kind of humanness slip away. I was feeling more like an animal in a lot of ways. My mind was slowing down, my thoughts were slowing down, and my whole life was kind of geared towards time, towards watching the light move across the cell and seeing time pass that way, trying to get to the end of the day so I could sleep. A lot of the time I was in solitary confinement, despite how much I really hated my interrogators, I was hoping to see them in the mornings because I needed someone to talk to so badly. There were times that I, just would watch ants on the floor, I would have lunch and put some food out so the ants would come and I could watch them just to have something to kind of focus my mind on.
Aunque la Organización de Naciones Unidas advierte que más de 15 días.
Though the United Nations warns that more than 15 days of solitary confinement is an act of torture and causes serious psychological damage, this practice has increased 40% in the U.S. in the last 10 years. It is estimated that approximately 80,000 inmates are currently locked up in a segregated housing unit, with prison sentences going from 5 months to 40 years.
Scientific studies show that in just 2 or 3 days, your brain waves start to shift towards stupor or delirium. So a lot of resistance was just, staying human, staying alive, maintaining hope, and not allowing them to break us. A lot of people in solitary confinement in the U.S. prisons, they say, I deserve to be in prison. I committed a crime, but I don't deserve to be tortured. And it doesn't benefit our society to release me into the streets in a worse mental state than when I came in. So many people come out of solitary confinement with less impulse control, and they have no resources. So that many of them go back to crime, and they end up back in prison, or they end up homeless in the street.
I think any time in solitary is enough time to break a human being.
El confinamiento solitario
Not only is solitary confinement a controversial practice because of the devastating psychological effects and low rates of rehabilitation, but also because of its cost. Keeping an inmate alone in solitary confinement costs about $75,000 per year, doubling the cost of having a single inmate on regular conditions.
La construcción de la más reciente prisión de este tipo le costó al estado de
The Arizona state spent $50,000 in the construction of a prison like this.
Clara Ibarra, José Monsalve, Telesur, Nueva York.
A criminal justice reporter here in the United States, Shane Bauer, recently published an investigation into solitary confinement at Pelican Bay State Prison in California. It's a place where inmates are taken when they're considered too dangerous for other prisons. Our correspondent Clara Ibarra has the story.
Más de 80,000 presos se encuentran en aislamiento de cualquier interacción humana, excepto de sus propios guardianes, por al menos 22 horas al día en las cárceles de Estados Unidos. Según estadísticas del Departamento de Corrección y Rehabilitación de California, los prisioneros de la cárcel Pelican Bay pasan en promedio 7.5 años en confinamiento solitario en celdas de 2 por 3 metros sin luz natural.
One person I met had not seen a tree in 12 years. And there were people that spent 30 or 40 years in that prison in solitary confinement. And many of them actually hadn't committed like violent infractions in prison. They were there because of their association with other people. They were there because of certain books that they were reading. These could have been academic books about the Black Panthers. Even things like Machiavelli's The Prince was used as evidence of gang affiliation, or writings about African American history was considered gang ideology, and was enough to put people away for decades. We're in a shoe cell right now. The inmate is outside. This is where he sleeps when there's another cellmate that sleeps up there. It's pretty bleak, I think. There's no natural light. Why don't they have windows here?
This way it was designed.
But why?
I don't know. I can't explain that.
Inmates come out to get some exercise. There's more room to run out here.
Prisoners only get an hour in this concrete dog run every day.
They're protected from the rain during the winter, and it's monitored with a video camera by the control booth.
Many people in this country are in solitary confinement for years or decades, and they're released with absolutely no support network. And the nature of solitary confinement, it's kind of a microcosm for our whole prison system, is that it severs people's ties with their families. And people come out with nothing and no one. And many people say, as much as all I wanted was to get free, once I was freed, I just wanted to go back to prison because it was so terrifying on the outside.
Para salir del confinamiento solitario por otros medios, un prisionero debe ser declarado legalmente miembro no activo de una pandilla, opción que hoy no llega ni al 1%, o colaborar con las autoridades y delatar a los integrantes de las pandillas, un procedimiento que al interior de las cárceles puede ser mortal. Yo soy Clara Ibarra, con José Monsalve, Telesur, Nueva York.
Sarah Short is a writer and survivor of solitary confinement. Today she'll talk about Opening the Box, her piece of theater that aims to raise awareness around the issue in the hopes that someday the practice will be banned.
Half of the suicides occurring in prison of the United States take place in solitary confinement cells. The journalist Sarah Short was confined to a cell of this kind for 410 days in Iran. On this segment, Sarah tells us about her latest work, a theater piece that aims at going beyond artistic frontiers to contribute with the eradication of this kind of tortures inside the United States prison.
I've been gathering oral and written testimonies of people in prolonged solitary confinement in the U.S. So I've done half a dozen prison visits. I've met with people that have been in solitary for decades, and I've also engaged in in-depth letter correspondences and in-person interviews. So they'll be woven together into a book, an anthology of writing by actual survivors, and a play called Opening the Box.
It is a sad thing to watch a human being go insane before your eyes because he can't handle the pressure that the box exerts on the mind. But it is sadder still to see the spirit shaken from the soul.
The real world is out of place in the hole, but the hole is nonetheless really here. The first time I did 18 months in the hole, I saw only 3 or 4 colors. I felt only concrete and steel.
In the hole, painful memories begin to throw out shoots and sprout like brittle weeds until finally the weeds choke to death everything else in the garden. You are left with a cold wasteland of scrubby weeds, flinty stone, and dusty soil.
You know, we start using long-term solitary confinement and building prisons for that purpose around the end of the 1980s, and that was at a time when we were really kind of moving away from rehabilitation in prisons. We were taking away, funding for rehabilitative programs, and we were starting to use money to build solitary confinement cells. So it was, instead of kind of having these measures that were a lot more prolonged and geared towards rehabilitation, we just kind of locked problem people away.
Thanks
to these kind of efforts, the American Federal Bureau of Prisons agreed to revise the cases of extreme solitary confinement, a very convenient measure, considering current estimates of about 350,000 prisoners with mental illness in the United States prison, most of them being in solitary confinement. This is tantamount to 10 times the number of citizens in psychiatric hospitals in the United States.
Yo soy Clara Ibarra, con Vanessa Bergonzoli, Telesur, Nueva York.
Law enforcement officials have been implicated in the abuse of human rights in the United States. Recent cases involved the deaths of one Latino man and 3 unarmed African Americans. But human rights abuses also take place in immigration detention centers, where men, women, and children are detained in the course of following their dreams.
The United States is far from a model of democracy where human rights are respected. Even its citizens agree. To be black can cost you your life in this country.
In the United States, there are rights that are violated, and I believe that a lot of people have a lot of preconceived notions.
America jailed 25% of the world total people in jail. I mean, that's huge. I mean, America only accounts only 5% of the world population, but the people they put in jail, especially those people are African Americans.
To be black can cost you your life in this country. Every 28 hours, an African American is killed by a vigilante or by law enforcement.
This is a moment in our country where we're really starting to re-engage the systems which reproduce racial injustice, and policing is sort of at the forefront of that today. In the past, it was Jim Crow, and before that, it was slavery.
Racism and police brutality aren't the only cases of abuse by US authorities. The recent Senate report on torture revealed more.
Renditions where we were kidnapping people out of countries and then taking them to secret locations where they were held without access to lawyers. They were tortured, maybe using waterboarding and other methods. And this is fairly well spelled out in this report that was released by the Senate.
While the United States has signed the United Nations Convention Against Torture and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in its immigration detention centres, these do not apply. Human rights advocacy organisations emphasise that a common tool for these abuses is the main media outlets, which, as the civil rights activist Malcolm X used to say, side with the oppressor and not with the oppressed.
Francesca Manuele, Washington DC, Telesur.
In the United States, immigrants are subject to routine human rights abuses. It's a situation that many organizations have condemned. And despite President Obama's executive actions on immigration, around 70% are still at risk of being deported. Let's find out more.
These immigration activists are in front of the Department of Homeland Security. They are demanding the elimination of the principal US deportation program, Secure Communities, which was recently renamed.
The program Secure Communities has been replaced by the Priority Enforcement Program. However, there is no further information that allows us to say that they are actually different.
Barack Obama has deported more people than any previous US president, more than 2 million people since he took office in 2009. The Secure Communities program played a prevalent role in the deportations.
With that program, they took the fingerprints of those arrested. Local police officers were forced to be part of the immigration system, even though they knew it was not right, and that didn't generate trust.
Policías locales sabían que eso es una mala forma de implementar la ley y una mala forma de construir pues confianza.
This measure was put in place to arrest criminals, but according to the reports, the majority of those deported had not committed a crime. At the moment, the Secure Communities program has been replaced by the Priority Enforcement program, which was designed to target criminals.
Sin embargo, ellos no están tan seguros, por lo que solicitan más información.
We demanded more information based on the Freedom Information Act to get to know the details of the Priority Enforcement program.
This program is part of the executive action announced by President Obama last November, which would exclude 7 million immigrants.
Si hemos hecho nuestra vida aquí, somos merecedores de un tipo de alivio. No vamos a ser divididos entre estudiantes y trabajadores, entre los que los soñadores.
Our entire lives is here. We deserve an opportunity. We should not be divided into students, dreamers, and workers. We are against this division. No more deportation. We all must be treated equally.
Recently, 2,000 immigrants were arrested after a 5-day police operation. They will be deported as part of the new priority enforcement program, despite the fact over half were not charged with having committed a crime.
Francesca Emanuele, Washington DC, Telesur.
That's all for today's The Real USA. Don't forget, you can always send us your comments and your suggestions to our Twitter @Telesur English. I'm Alexandra Hall. See you next time.